As the group of friends sat around the table, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They had gathered to attempt a séance, something they had never done before but had always been curious about. They had done their research, read books on the subject, and even watched videos online, but nothing could prepare them for what they were about to experience. The room was dimly lit, with candles placed strategically around the table. The group held hands, closed their eyes, and began to focus their energy. They started to chant, calling out to the spirits and asking them to make their presence known. At first, there was nothing but silence. But then, something started to happen. The temperature in the room dropped, and the candles flickered erratically. Suddenly, the table began to shake, and the group could feel a presence in the room with them. It was at that moment that they realized they had made a grave mistake. The room was filled with a deafening silence as they tried to process what was happening. Then, out of nowhere, the candles went out, leaving the group in complete darkness. They tried to call out to each other, but their voices were muffled by an inexplicable force. One by one, the group members began to disappear. The first one to go was Sarah, who was pulled under the table by an unknown entity. Then, Chris was dragged out of the room by something unseen, leaving only 3 members left. The remaining members, John, Jessica, and Michael, huddled together, scared and unsure of what to do. Suddenly, the candles flickered back to life, and they could see a figure standing in front of them. It was a woman, dressed in all white, with long black hair that covered her face. The woman beckoned them to follow her, and without thinking, they did. They walked down a dark hallway, the walls lined with portraits of long-dead people. The woman led them to a door and disappeared before their very eyes. Hesitantly, they opened the door and walked into a room filled with mirrors. They could see themselves reflected 100 times over, but as they looked closer, they realized something wasn't right. Their reflections were moving on their own, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The group tried to run, but they were trapped. The mirrors had become portals, and they were now stuck inside them, forever trapped in a never-ending nightmare. As the group screamed in terror, their voices echoed throughout the room, bouncing off the mirrors and traveling into the unknown. They were now just another group of victims of the dark spirits they had called upon. The séance had turned out to be a grave mistake, one they would never recover from. The Thompsons family was overjoyed when they finally found their dream home after months of searching. It was a spacious Victorian-era house with a big backyard, a charming front porch, and an old-fashioned fireplace. The only thing that seemed out of place was a small door hidden behind a bookshelf in the library. When they asked the realtor about it, he brushed it off as a remnant of the previous owner's renovations. But the Johnsons couldn't help but feel intrigued by the door. It was like a forbidden passage to another world, one that was waiting to be explored. One day, while the parents were out of town, the kids decided to investigate the door. They pushed the bookshelf aside and opened the door, revealing a narrow staircase leading to a dimly lit basement. As they descended the stairs, a cold draft hit their faces, making them shiver. They reached the bottom and found themselves in a room that seemed frozen in time. There was a table with an old typewriter on it, a dusty armchair, and shelves lined with yellowed books. But what caught their attention was a series of photographs hanging on the wall. They were old and faded, showing strange and unsettling scenes. A man wearing a black hood, people standing in a circle, holding hands, and candles flickering in the dark. Suddenly, the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut, making the kids jump. Panic set in as they tried to open it, but it was stuck. They were trapped in the room with no way out. Hours passed as the kids huddled together, scared and confused. They heard strange noises, footsteps, and whispers that seemed to come from behind the walls. As night fell, they realized that they were not alone in the room. The armchair creaked, and the typewriter started to type by itself, as if someone was controlling it. The photographs on the wall began to glow, and the figures in them started to move. The man in the hood stepped out of the photograph and approached them, his eyes fixed on the children. They screamed, but no one could hear them. They were trapped in the secret room, in the clutches of an unknown force that was not of this world. Days later, the parents returned home, only to find the front door ajar and the house empty. They searched for their children, calling out their names, but there was no answer. They went to the library and found the bookshelf askew, revealing the secret door. They opened it and saw the narrow staircase leading down to the basement. As they descended the stairs, they felt a cold draft, and a sense of dread washed over them. They reached the bottom and found themselves in a room that seemed frozen in time. The typewriter was still typing, the armchair was still creaking, and the photographs were still glowing. But the children were nowhere to be found. They had vanished without a trace, leaving no clue as to where they had gone. The only thing that remained was a message typed on the paper by the typewriter. It read, "You should not have opened.